I'm excited today because I'm bringing to the webinar what I'm going to call sticking points and other things that happen in recovery. So today we're going to talk about two of them. As you know, every webinar, I come bringing to you what shows up in my office or in group. So today we're going to talk about two different situations. We're going to talk about what we can do. I'm going to give you some tools that you can apply and use as part of psychoeducation that will help you with your own recovery, whether you are an addict partner or if you're trying to heal from betrayal trauma. So the situation I want to share with you today is I will see a betrayed partner come in and they are triggered all the time. They report that they are constantly experiencing trauma responses leading to outside their window of tolerance, which we'll talk about in a moment, and of course, experiencing a lot of distress. Now, in the early days of betrayal recovery, that's pretty common. However, I'm talking about the betrayed partner that they've actually been in recovery for several months and they're still struggling. So when I look at one of those clients that come in, I start to kind of look at some different factors that might be in play. So some of the probable causes might be that they're stuck in their betrayal. And why are they stuck? Well, typically they're stuck because they're not doing their own consistent recovery work. I've had partners kind of minimize some really simple things, like when we're asking them to do mindfulness practices, or we're telling them that they need to focus on different aspects of their lives and meeting their needs. They just don't see the purpose for it. Or they're not really committed to creating a recovery routine. While they want their addict partner to be doing recovery on a consistent basis, they might have so many other things in their life that are coming at them that they don't take the time to implement and also integrate their own recovery routine. The other thing that I see is sometimes the betrayed partner needs the addict partner to be okay and be there comforting them so that they can stay emotionally regulated rather than taking the steps to kind of step into their own recovery and not relying solely on the addict partner for them to feel okay. The other thing that's really important is that the betrayed partner doesn't quite understand the concept of balance. So we're going to talk a little bit about balance today, and I'm going to share with you kind of how I present it in group and with my clients, how we work on identifying where we're getting out of balance and what to do about it. So the concept of balance isn't just for the addicts, it's also for the betrayed partners. We find that couples, addict partners, betrayed partners who really strive and work on balance, they get through their recovery quicker with less, I think, resistance to their healing. And it's much, I just find that people will regulate quicker, and we see couples being able to create connection in a faster manner when both are working individually on creating their own balance and then coming together and creating that balance as a couple. So one of the first goals is to create that balance and then to remain balanced. There's going to be times we're going to get out of balance, but we're also at the same time going to gain the skills and the tools necessary and the ability to recognize when you're starting to get out of balance and then moving back into balance by using those tools and skills that you've learned. So one of the analogies we use is that recovery is a lot like standing up in a rowboat. I don't know if any of you have ever stood up in a rowboat, but it takes a lot of skill to remain balanced. And the recovery process is oftentimes like standing up in a rowboat. It's really hard at times to get your footing. It's hard to create balance. Things are constantly moving. And so it's important that not only the addicts find the balance, but the betrayed partners. So what I will see when I notice a partner out of balance is that they're going into trauma responses, or they are telling me they're experiencing situations that are creating crisis or a lot of emotional distress. Now, as a reminder, through the Prodependence lens, we kind of look at the betrayed partner as in a period of crisis during the first 3 to 12 months. So we're really working on stabilization then. I'm really focusing on balance. So that's one of my goals in the very beginning as a therapist, is to educate and help my betrayed partners implement all the skills and tools necessary to create stabilization. Now, I often see somebody who's stabilized and they're now working on betrayal trauma. They get out of balance even then. And so what I've got to do is to help them to understand what are the physical responses that are happening for them, and how do we get to a state of balance? How do we get them back into their window of tolerance? So let's review the window of tolerance just briefly. I love the concept of the window of tolerance. Dan Siegel was the creator of the window of tolerance. And so what the window of tolerance is that window is the optimal zone that we are in when we're feeling grounded. When I'm in my window of tolerance, I can handle things. I can take the stressors of life. I can manage my emotions. I can approach them with logic and reasoning because I'm connected to that front part of my brain, that prefrontal cortex, which is that executive functioning part of our brain. We feel good when we're in our window of tolerance. When I'm in my window of tolerance, I'm able to live in the present moment. I feel like I'm doing well, and I'm feeling more positive rather than experiencing negative emotions. However, we know that when we experience trauma, it's going to take us outside that window of tolerance. I often refer to this as our bandwidth. How much bandwidth do I have? How much stress can I take before my brain goes, I can no longer stay in that prefrontal part of my brain, and now I've got to go back into that limbic system, into fight, flight, or freeze. And when I'm there, I'm now outside my window of tolerance. So when one experiences betrayal, because of the relationship and the disconnection that occurs as a result of the addict partner's addiction, the betrayed partner is going to go outside of his or her window of tolerance. That window of tolerance is going to narrow. So one of the things we have to do to create balance is to increase the window of tolerance so that you can handle even just the normal stresses of life. Because when we're in that trauma from betrayal, even the little things of life will throw us out of our window of tolerance. When a betrayed partner is out of their window of tolerance, even the simplest of tasks are hard to accomplish. Thoughts, emotions are very unpredictable and distressing. And we will see the betrayed partners thinking, feeling, and doing things they would never imagine doing prior to the experiences they've had with their betrayal. And so almost anything can throw them into that limbic part of their brain. So how do we find the balance? So one of the things we've got to do, like I said, is increase that window of tolerance. We do this by implementing some practices, the routines and the rituals. You know, I love that concept of routines and rituals. And I've shared this story before, in that one day I attended a seminar where someone was presenting how to find happiness in life and presented the concept of routines and rituals. And the experience that they shared was, having been in a graduate studies program, they went to Africa, to an area where the people were very impoverished, and they found that they were so happy. So this particular person went to the women of the village and said, I want you to document your life. I want to figure out what makes you so happy. And so disposable cameras were given, and the women were then instructed to take pictures of everything that they did throughout their life, through their daily routines. And then this particular individual brought the data back and looked at it and discovered that these women had routines and rituals. So every day they'd wake up and they did the exact same thing every morning. How they created their meals, they brought the family together for breakfast, how they went down to the watering hole to gather water, how they had specific meetings with other women. They do cacao ceremonies at night. The villagers would get together and dance on certain days, you know, during certain seasons. And so she came to the conclusion that it is through routines and rituals that we truly find happiness. That's because we're in balance. So one of the things is, I go back to that boat analogy with my clients and say, we've got to create the routines and rituals so that you can stay balanced in your boat. So we identify several things. The first thing we identify are, what are the ways of life? What are the stressors that you experience day to day? And what are the stressors you experience as a result of your betrayal trauma? So we kind of think of that as the water you're in. These are the waters you have to navigate. And so we have an exercise where they literally identify the betrayed partners in group, and I do it in session as well. We list all of the things you're having to deal with day in and day out. Then the second thing we do is we start looking at, what are the threatening behaviors? What are the warning signs that let you know? So in our diagram we look at this as kind of the clouds in the sky. What's kind of indicating to us that there might be a storm coming? So it can be everything from I'm not doing things on a routine basis, or I've stopped going to see my therapist every 2 weeks like I was before, or I'm not eating. It can be something very simple. I'm not sleeping enough. So we call those the warning behaviors or the threatening behaviors. Those are the things that if we start doing, it can lead us into those old, unhelpful patterns that are less than healthy. And then, of course, we're going to look at what are the stabilizing behaviors. I like to call these they're kind of the oars of the boat, right? We need those to work equally. We need those to kind of keep us moving forward. And so we've got to stop and look at what are the oars? What works for each of these betrayed partners to help them stay balanced and moving forward in their healing recovery? So, of course, one of the things we work on is that mindfulness practice. I know it sounds so simple, but the research shows that 15 to 20 minutes every day will strengthen the connection you have to your prefrontal cortex. So that means that when all of a sudden I'm starting to go outside my window of tolerance, right? If I am practicing mindfulness, then I can step right back into it and it's going to help me stay regulated. There's so many different resources out there. You can go to all sorts of apps now. You can go to YouTube. You can find music. I recommend, though, to the betrayed partners in early recovery that you find some type of guided meditation or somebody is speaking to you and you can listen to their instructions where they're just talking to you through your breathing and how to breathe or how to focus on certain muscle groups. So mindfulness is very important. Another aspect of mindfulness is this. Oftentimes when we're in our trauma responses, it's because we are thinking about what's happened in the past, which is where our brain wants to take us because of our trauma, but it also takes us into the future. So I project into the future, worrying about all of the possible things that could happen moving forward. And mindfulness means I come back into the present moment and I'm back in my body. I loved it just recently. I had a group member who shared with us when she's out of her window of tolerance, it's because she's in the future. And she's literally written some affirmations that remind her that in this moment, I have all the skills and tools necessary to handle any situation that comes my way. In this moment, I am in my healing recovery journey. So she always started every affirmation with the reminder of in this moment, and it brings her back to the present time. So I love that. Mindfulness is so important. And oftentimes we look over that thinking, that doesn't work for me. It's never worked for me. But there's so many different types of mindfulness. The second thing that's really important is learn breathing techniques. Breathing is such an incredible way to help us regulate. Everything from box breathing, and box breathing is a very common trauma type breathing, which is a very deep breathing. I call it belly breathing. Anybody who does yoga understands that when I'm breathing that way, I'm breathing deep into my belly first, and then filling my lungs, then my head with oxygen and air. And when I'm doing it with the box breathing, I tell my clients, imagine you're tracing a box or a square. So as you breathe in slowly and deeply through your nose, you're going to count to 4. You're going to hold the inhalation for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold the exhalation for 4. So what I'm doing is I'm stimulating something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve starts near the limbic region, right? It goes down by our brainstem through there, down through our neck, down through our diaphragm, and then it branches out in our gut. So when I breathe like that, it's going to trigger, or actually my nerve that runs through the diaphragm, that vagus nerve, gets stimulated as I breathe in and as I exhale out. So it's a really great way to cause the parasympathetic system, or the calming nervous part of our system, to engage. Okay, secondly, I love the 4-7-8 breathing. We breathe in through the nose to the count of 4. I exhale slowly out of my mouth to the count of 7. And then I hold it for the count of 8, and I repeat that. So that's a really great way. Counting is a really great way to regulate us. So the important part is you count as you breathe. It'll help get you back in your body. Another thing I like is when anxiety hits, right? A great thing to do is a great big deep cleansing breath in through your nose and out through your mouth really slow. And do that a couple of times and then move into what I call circle breathing. So it's like you're tracing a circle in your head, breathing as slow as you can and feel comfortable. And then you exhale as you trace down to the bottom of the circle. And I always love to combine it with some positive beliefs or positive affirmations. So I often combine it with things like telling myself I'm calm, I can handle this situation, I'm safe, life isn't always going to be this hard. Whatever I need in that moment, I will pair my circle breathing with those positive statements. Okay. The third thing, we've got to come up with some dailies. Dailies are those 4 areas in my life, which we call emotional or kind of personal things to do for myself, spiritual things to do for myself to feed my spirit, physical, the things I need to do to support my body, and relational, connection I'm making with other people. So in those areas, we recommend that you find 2 of those things that you need each day and each week so that you're focusing in those 4 areas on meeting those needs on a daily basis. So one of the exercises that we have is we recommend that you take and you get a tracking sheet. So you've got all 7 days of the week, you've got all those 4 areas with 2 particular tasks in each of those areas, and then you start tracking what you're doing. Now, we also combine that with an exercise where you identify what your needs are. So what you would do is you would look at physically, what do I need? Well, I need 8 hours of sleep. I need to be in bed by 10 p.m. I need to eat breakfast. I need to go out and walk 20 minutes a day. I've got a lot of my betrayed partners where they find that if they're having a bad day and they go to the gym and they get on a treadmill and they walk briskly or they run for 20 minutes, there's a reset. So put that down as one of your needs. Spiritually, what do I need? For some people, it is maybe doing a practice where you're tapping into God or your higher power or the universe. I also look at it as through the lenses of feeding your spirit. What does my spirit need to feel better? So do I need to go out and be in nature and connect with nature? Do I need to listen to music because it fills my spirit and moves me? So do I need to journal because I'm tapping into my spirit? I'm calming my mind and kind of tapping into my wisdom. Those are all spiritual practices. Relationally, am I connecting with people that are supportive, non-judgmental, and the type that can support me in recovery efforts? Am I connecting with my group members if I'm in a group? Very, very important. And then lastly, that part I said, that personal or that emotional part, checking in all the time and going, what do I need? What do I need right now to do for myself? Do I need to go to lunch with a friend? Do I need to take a nap, read a book, do a hobby? Do I need to go get a massage? Do I need to take things off of my to-do list? So constantly tracking that. And if you'll do that for 1 week, then we have the women go back in and notice, where am I lacking? Which area am I struggling in? Because remember, it's easy to get out of balance. Even doing one good thing to an excess will create us to go into imbalance. So we need to have those 4 areas covered. So it's really, really important. Okay. So that's what I'm going to say about balance. So briefly, we're going to talk about the second scenario that comes in, and that is the betrayed partner who comes in and they're sharing with me that they're having a lot of trauma responses where there's anger, and sometimes that anger then becomes rage. So it's really important that anger is a part of feeling betrayal. I've talked in the past about that loss and that grief we experience. And one of the stages of loss and grief is anger. So I'm going to have anger as a part of that. And remember, anger is a core emotion that is not necessarily negative. Anger in and of itself is a good thing because it can help us be aware of some things in a positive way. It's what we do with the anger. So our anger is there to help us know that maybe there's some action you need to take. Maybe there's some boundaries you need to establish or reestablish or redefine. Or maybe you need to be motivated to make a change. Anger is an emotion that has a lot of energy behind it. So when our anger shows up, it's really important that we do use it in a productive way. If we use it in a less healthy way, then it can cause damage to ourselves, especially when we turn it inward, and to others when we turn it outward. So it's really important to learn how to understand your anger and learn how to express it in a healthy way. So let me take a moment and talk about rage, because rage is something that is so powerful. It is not only anger, but it is a combination of a variety of really strong, intense emotions. So when our anger combines with fear, when it combines with sadness, when it combines with resentment, all of a sudden it takes on a different nature. So rage is very explosive. It also has that hurtful expression that can really severely damage a relationship. Now, obviously, when I'm in rage, my brain is severely hijacked. I am so limbic. When I'm in that state, I can't think rationally, calmly, or clearly. And oftentimes when I'm in rage, I don't even remember what I've done. And that's where it can be very damaging, because the person it's directed towards will remember. You're not going to, but they may. And then we have to work and do repair on that. So it's very important that raging behaviors towards another person or towards oneself should be viewed as being abusive and out of control. So we want to do whatever we can to prevent the betrayed partner or an addict partner from getting to that point. It's really wise to work with a therapist to identify how it's showing up, what's leading you into the rage, and what are the tools you can start using so you don't get there. Or if you move into rage, what can you do immediately to get out of it? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do with your anger and how to learn and how to understand and how to use your anger in a positive way, and thus preventing you moving into rage. Okay, so number one, I love the concept of sitting in your anger. Now, I was raised in a family where anger was not viewed as a positive. Anger was not expressed in a positive way. So the concept of sitting in anger was one I didn't understand until I did my own recovery work. And what we do when we sit in anger is we've got to acknowledge, I'm angry right now. So that's simple. Just say it out loud. If you're having a difficult time recognizing when you're angry or you think that anger is bad, just make it very non-judgmental and in a compassionate way. Just say, I'm really angry right now. And then allow yourself just to acknowledge it and to feel it in your body. So oftentimes what we can do is we can recognize, gosh, I'm feeling it in my chest or my head, or it's in my stomach. And then ask it what its purpose is for being there. So get into a quiet space, notice where you feel it in your body, and begin to ask it, what is your purpose for showing up? Are you here to make me aware of something? If so, what is it? Are you here to let me know that I need to do things differently? Are you trying to get my attention and have me move forward on something that I'm not moving forward on? So oftentimes in the early days, it's easier to journal this. Right now, I've done it enough that I can sit and start to recognize, this is what I was thinking. And we're going to talk about thinking about your anger in a minute. This led me into my anger. This is what I need to change. And this is what I need to do differently. So sitting in your anger, our limbic brain tells us we got to act on our anger now. Sitting in our anger means I'm going to take a break from that. I'm going to take a time out and sit in it and figure it out. Okay, number two, visualizing your anger. I talked about where do you feel it in your body. So identify where it's at in your body. And then you're going to combine it with some of your breathing. As you focus on that area where you feel it in your body, you begin to breathe. And then you're going to use some visual tools to help that anger move through your body. So one that I like is imagining that as you're breathing, with every breath, your anger is pouring out the bottoms of your feet. So it's almost like it's moving down your body and it's going out the bottoms of your feet into the earth. I like to put my anger in a vault and then I seal the vault shut. Another idea, visualize your anger being like a fire. And imagine there's water pouring in through the top of your head. And as it comes in, it's going to extinguish the flames. It's going to dissolve the anger. As you're breathing, it becomes very, very effective. Another one I like is I'll have my clients imagine they're breathing into the anger. The oxygen is releasing the anger. And as they exhale out, they're blowing the anger away. So all of those are very, very effective tools. Another thing, number 3, we can write about our anger. I love journaling. I love the dump method. So when I was going through my betrayal trauma, I had a journal that was just for my anger. I actually called it my hate journal because that felt really good to me. And it was about everything that made me angry that I hated about life that I was going through. So what I would do is I'd find a quiet place. For me, it was a walk-in closet that I could shut and have privacy. And then I would just write everything I was feeling, all the anger, what was causing it, every thought, every concern. It didn't matter if it was present anger, past anger, future anger. I wrote it down until I had no more to write. I literally let it just come out until I was exhausted. And then I didn't edit it. I didn't read it. I just put it away. And the ironic thing is that as I worked my recovery down the road, I found my hate journal and I started looking through the pages and realized that I was no longer angry about that. And I would rip pages out until eventually the day came where I ripped out the last page and threw the entire journal away. So it's a very effective way to work on your anger. Number 4, releasing your anger. This is a great way to physically use physical movement to get anger out of your body. So some of the methods that I encourage my clients to use, and they come back reporting that it works well, is one of them is go to one of your Dollar Tree stores or one of those cheap stores where you can get things for $1 and get a pool noodle, cut it in half. And when you're angry, go out and whack a trunk of a tree using a pool noodle. It's not going to damage the tree. And as you're doing that, you're going to make noise. You know, you can even yell out what you're angry about, but you want movement. Another one I like is throwing ice cubes against the ground, or if you're like in Arizona, we have block fences, throwing them against a block fence. Again, making noise while you're doing that. You can use a racket and hit it against a bed. I had somebody in a group this last week say, you know, they took a pillow, they punch a pillow. I also like the screaming method, and I'm going to tell you how I do it. I usually go in my car where nobody's around. My car's kind of soundproof, and I will scream from my gut a couple of times. I will feel exhausted, but my anger's gone. You can scream into a pillow. That last idea of screaming, you want to find a private place to do it because you don't want anybody to think that something bad's happening or, you know, call for emergency help because you're screaming your anger out. Okay. Number 5, vent your anger to somebody. So you want to find a trusted friend, somebody that's compassionate, somebody that's got wisdom. Sometimes as we talk about our anger, we connect dots, we can become more enlightened, we can understand it better. Okay. And then lastly, think about your anger. I love the idea that when my anger is starting up, I know where I feel it physically in my body. Then I go back and I ask, what was I just thinking? What were the negative thoughts I had about myself or the negative thoughts I had about someone else that triggered my anger? So if it's about myself, I need to have a self-compassion statement in place. And I go to that self-compassion statement. I use my breathing. I say that to myself. I think it to myself until I feel my anger going away. If it's towards somebody else, like my addict partner, then I need to come up with some positive, compassionate statements about them and do the same thing with them. And it's amazing how if you can catch it in that thinking stage, that it is minimized. It becomes more minimal, I should say. It's not as strong, as intense, because I'm catching it before it gets really high and I have to try to hit it at its peak. That's when it's hard to control and hard to kind of learn from. So anyway, I hope these are some really good practical application ideas for a couple of the things that show up in my office. Next week, we're going to talk about the fear cycle because I'm seeing this show up. So we're going to talk about the ways it shows up and some of the helpful skills and tools we can use to help us when we're in fear, whether we're an addict or we're a betrayed partner.
Thank you, Debbie. That was, you know, every time I fill in with you, you said you always know when I'm coming, even if you haven't been told. I always know that when you talk, you're going to talk about exactly what I just taught in my class like that morning or the night before. I mean, we were literally talking about, you know, how betrayed partners stay in crisis for much longer than the addicts would like. And, you know, and how they can calm down. And it's the same techniques for the addicts to calm themselves, particularly with the anger. we were talking about grounding and staying in the moment and all of this stuff. And it's just wonderful. And I'm always struck because I primarily work directly with addicts and you primarily work directly with partners. The techniques are the same. The feelings are the same. The causes are different. The causes are coming from different spots, but the feelings and the techniques and even the needs under the feelings, like I'm feeling angry because I have an unmet need of something. I need to be validated. I need to be seen. I need to be heard, whatever. And it's not being met. And my partner may not be able to meet it right now. So I need some coping skills like breath work and all this good stuff. So yeah, just spot on. And I love that you wrote in a walk-in closet. My first grad school writing instructor, she wrote her first novel in the bathroom. She had kids and she found she could get about 20 minutes at a pop if she went into the bathroom and locked the door. She wrote a novel. So yeah, whatever works. So, all right, we've got some questions here. Shall we jump into them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first one, I'd love to hear some tools and support around friends who are not supportive and are making healing and recovery harder because of their opinions, especially ones that don't believe in sex addiction and only see this as abuse and think the only way out is to leave. Can you address how often you see that, number one, and then maybe answer the question more directly?
Yeah. Well, I want you to know that I see that frequently. If I were to guess percentage-wise, I'd say it's probably in about a third of my clients. And like I said, I've got a heavy load. Most of my clients are betrayed partners. And so I see that about a third of the time. I know that most oftentimes well-meaning friends, they automatically go to, they want to protect you. And so as part of that protection is they want you to leave. And you're right, they don't understand all the complexities of betrayal trauma. A lot of people don't believe in sex addiction, and that's really doubly hard. So I want to acknowledge that you're in a very difficult position and a difficult place. So I'm going to give you some ideas, and I'm going to tell you what I would tell my clients and work through with them. Of course, sometimes I'm not this direct with my clients. I kind of lead them and guide them to understand this. But the first thing is, number one, sometimes well-meaning, supportive friends are going to not be those that you turn to. You have in the past, they've been safe in the past, but if they don't understand sex addiction, it may fall on deaf ears if you're trying to educate them. And so sometimes we just have to accept them for where they're at. And then we're going to kind of put them I put them in that middle circle of support. So those are going to be the people that I go to for specific things. Maybe not for help in my healing and my betrayal, but maybe they're the friends that I go to when I want to have a healthy distraction. And I need them in my recovery to help me kind of step back into just connecting with friends, where I don't go deep with them. I don't talk about my betrayal. And I don't, get their opinion and their advice, because they can't stand in and step into this place of, I call it being a compassionate observer. That means I'm stepping out of judgment, not only of my partner who's got the addiction, but me as the betrayed partner who's choosing to stay. And hopefully along the way, you'll have opportunities, if they're open, to educate them and help them. And hopefully they can become more of an inner circle friend. So for you, you're going to have to find more inner circle people. So inner circle people are going to be things like, hopefully you've got a therapist that can support you. That's a great support. Join a group. Get into a group. I can't tell you how important that is. I oftentimes hear this. I'm going to tell you, this is more like, 60% of the time, I find that the women in group haven't shared with very many people about their betrayal trauma. Maybe one person at the most. So now all of a sudden they're joining a group, and they now have 9 other women that automatically become a source of healthy connection, because they're learning in group how to be vulnerable, how to stay out of judgment, how to reach out to people that don't have judgment, to people who have an understanding of addiction and especially betrayal trauma. And so now I can rely on them. So my friends that are middle circle, all of a sudden it doesn't hurt as bad that they can't be there for me. So it's really important that you expand your support group in that area. Those that understand betrayal can give you ideas you can turn to for venting your anger or just telling them about a situation that's hard. What I love about group is they're all learning skills and tools. And so they're really good at offering ideas when the person is asking for ideas on how to manage a situation. Now, I often do see that sex addiction is seen as abuse. There is a line of thinking on that. And I know it feels abusive. I recognize that. I don't believe that an addict's intention is to abuse. Now, do they get into behaviors that are that? Absolutely. And the goal is that part of their recovery is that self-awareness. And I know, Scott, you can speak to this, but oftentimes we get into addiction, the majority of the time, because we don't know how to manage emotions. We don't know how to manage and understand what's going on internally for us. And so we turn to the addiction to help us, and we cope with the addiction in a healthy way by going into these addictions. And it's more complex than that. So, it might seem to them that it is abusive, but recognize that in recovery, the addict is working on stepping out of those behaviors. So in the meantime, for you, it's learning to have the right kind of boundaries around this, and even the boundaries with your friends. And so you can acknowledge that they understand that way. I love the trick that I teach my clients, and that is when somebody says something to you that is just something you really don't agree with, and maybe they don't even know what they're talking about, I believe we need to validate that you hear them. So for me, it sounds like, I understand that's how you see it, or I understand that's how you think it is. However, right now I see this as I'm having betrayal trauma due to my partner's sex addiction. And we're both in recovery, and I have hope for the future. Right. And then it might be, yeah, I understand that you think that the best way out is for me to leave. However, I've got a real connection with this person. I have a history. We have children. So for me, the best option is to do recovery and to work on my healing. And so then that way we've acknowledged, but we've set a very loving boundary. So anyway, those are some of the things we talk about.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why we're so strongly in favor of prodependence as opposed to codependence. Codependence will kind of blame the partner for staying and shame the partner for staying. Prodependence celebrates the partner for wanting to stay and continue to love a troubled person, and then says, okay, let's find out how we can do this safely for you and how it can be done effectively for your partner and your relationship. Coda says, detach with love. I don't know that that's always the best idea. So.
And I love what you said, and that is that attachment piece, right? With prodependence, we're looking at addiction as an attachment disorder, right? We're also looking at it from the angle of the betrayed partner. This is a disruption to your attachment to the one person that you've been the most vulnerable with, that you love the most in life. And it is traumatizing when that happens. And so it's not easy to step away and just disconnect. It isn't. That's why I love the prodependence model. And that is, right, I want to heal this attachment. And sometimes as a partner, I've got to work on my betrayal trauma and stepping out of my safety seeking. It's not all or nothing, because it's about attachment. When I make it about that attachment and healing the attachment and understanding what happens when this type of a situation occurs, this addiction, creating this, disconnection. And then I think it's a different way we look at it. And I really like it. To me, it's less traumatizing overall.
Yeah. Yeah. It's supportive instead of
Yes.
blaming and shaming. And blame and shame is trauma,
Yeah.
More of it.
Yes.
we got enough of that going on already.
Yes.
Okay, next question. I had disclosure this week, and while still processing, I'm generally feeling lighter. And the best way I can describe it as a betrayed partner is I finally feel that I have congruency after 19 months of waiting for full therapeutic disclosure and 15 years after the first discovery. Is this normal to feel this kind of lightness post full therapeutic disclosure? I'm also feeling lost as to what happens next, as I didn't really expect to get to this point. What recovery and healing milestones would be healthy to consider for me and my husband? What a lovely, hopeful question, actually. I think.
Yes, I love that question. Yes, I'm going to tell you that generally feeling lighter is something that I do hear from the betrayed partners. You waited a long time. I'm going to tell you, waiting 19 months for a formal therapeutic disclosure is a long time. I oftentimes have women coming in and they're just starting the early stages of recovery and they want disclosure then right away, right? And they're like a month into it. And, they just die when I say, no, we got to get you stabilized. We've got to get your window of tolerance increased some. So we got to look at maybe 4 or 5 months down the road and, see if you're ready then. So I want I just really admire you for being able to go 19 months. And especially that 15 years, that kind of came up this week in one of my sessions. I had somebody that said, I've been dealing with betrayal trauma really for 18 years and, I'm still struggling. And so I want to recognize that that's hard too, 15 years. So absolutely you'd feel lighter because now everything is out in the open. You've got everything now, all the pieces of the puzzle are fitting together. I think that's the congruency piece. I'm finally seeing that, maybe some of my concerns and my worries, and hopefully in your formal therapeutic disclosure, you got to ask all the questions you needed to ask. Now my brain can start to make sense of it. Now I'm able to kind of feel like my partner is being open and authentic and honest, and that we now have hope. Because all of the secrets are out, everything's been acknowledged. My addict partner has pushed through their shame to be honest and open. And I've been able to sit even in my own trauma and hear it, and we survived. I love it when my formal therapeutic disclosures have a positive ending like this. I oftentimes see at the end of a formal therapeutic disclosure that the couple, they come together and I see a connection even before they leave session. So yes, it's normal to feel light. I'm going to tell you though that there are some betrayed partners that it takes them a little bit of time to recover. So that's also another experience as well. So those of you that don't have that light feeling, know that it's also normal that I just went through something really hard. I heard some things maybe I didn't know about, and I need to process it. And so it might take even several weeks for a betrayed partner, even a couple of months, depending on who they're going to for therapy, right? To kind of process through that. We happen to use some therapeutic approaches that I can go in and I can help my clients process some of the things that they experienced in their disclosure, that then they get regulated right away. And then they get stabilized. And then all of a sudden they're seeing that, oh man, we're back on better ground. We're now open and honest. I'm seeing my addict partner's shame go away. So that's another experience as well. So you also asked what recovery and healing milestones would be healthy to consider. So at this point, I'm hoping you did an impact letter. That's one of the things we do. We do it separate from actually our formal therapeutic disclosures. We like the betrayed partner to be able to hear everything and then sit in that and then work with their therapist to kind of put the impact letter together. We bring the couple back together in a therapist's office where the betrayed partner is going to read the impact letter and give it to the addict partner. And then we want to check in with the addict partner, process things for both of them before they leave. I like to have a roadmap at that point. What are you going to do for couples therapy? Because now we're working on the repair. We are in recovery now to the point where we're stabilized, we're using our skills, our tools, we're doing consistent recovery behaviors, we're learning, we're growing, and now we want to repair that disconnection to the attachment. And so come up with some type of a plan for couples therapy. My recommendation and what we do in those early days post-disclosure is that you would see your own individual therapist one week, and then maybe the next week you do couples, the following week you do individual, then the next week you do couples. So then you're kind of doing some of your own work that you go away from couples, understanding you need to work on, and then going back into couples. And then eventually my goal is, as a betrayed partners therapist, is you might see me once a month while you're in our program, and then you're doing a little more couples work. And so we eventually kind of shift you out of doing your individual work unless something comes up. Again, we're also processing the trauma too, the betrayal trauma. But once you get to that point where you feel like that's been done, I like to see my clients do more couples counseling. So I think that those are healthy milestones. Come up with a plan.
Yeah, and I will just add, a lot of times when the addicts are resistant to doing therapeutic disclosure, I explain to them, until you do disclosure, your wife is left making up stories, and they will be worst case scenario stories. She is having thoughts in her heads of stuff that you've never done. Get the truth out. She will feel better, hopefully, most of the time, and you will certainly feel better. And the relationship can start to heal now that we know what reality is. I mean, the word congruency there, absolutely. It's like, oh, I know reality now. I can deal with it. It's a therapeutic disclosure is a huge milestone. I just want to reiterate what Debbie said. 19 months is a long time to wait for that. You were very patient. Usually 3 to 6 months we want to have a disclosure. Is that, yeah. So, all right, next one here. I'm a betrayed partner and do 7 days a week of recovery, with 3 of those days related to my anger issues. I went to a treatment facility only to be further traumatized by these CSATs there. I was singled out, bullied, and cornered after being told I need to go into inpatient treatment. This has terribly set me back in trusting a therapist. I'm a rager, and because of this and having taken it out on my sex addict husband, which has further destroyed my progress, I'm working hard at this, but I have a lot to overcome. I'll just real quick say, not every CSAT is prodependence oriented. Some of them are still in the old CODA model, and this happens. Debbie, I'll turn it over to you now.
I totally agree. So hypothetically, if I had you as my client, first of all, I would first of all recognize the trauma that you had. We really need to validate that and identify the specific ways you've been traumatized. I like to look at, I look at my trauma tree, and I look at, the leaves and the branches being the situations and symptoms you have, and the trunk of the tree being what are the negative beliefs you have as a result of the root, the trauma. So what did you come away from that experience believing about yourself? And I've got to identify that you're back in trauma again. So I'm going to approach you as somebody where, first of all, I've got to identify where's the trauma and what do we need to go to help you get over the trauma from going to treatment. Okay, that's one of the things. There's several different things we would be doing. The other thing is, I want to look and see I want to look at your window of tolerance in general, right? And sometimes I have clients that their window of tolerance, they just can't get it to widen because the brain has been so heavily traumatized, or so I should say exerted and exhausted as a result of the trauma. So because in my past I have a nursing background, I look at it also from a physiological perspective, and that is maybe your brain isn't producing all of the chemicals it needs, the serotonin, those neurotransmitters. And so we might need to get you on some medication, short term, maybe long term, to support your brain. And you'd be amazed at how the positive effect that has on you being able to regulate your anger and not going into rage. The other thing, if my clients are having a difficult time with anger, sometimes I might do some of the assessments that I have as a CSAT, because you may have past PTSDs and traumas. So we got to look at that. Is that also, because I see my betrayed partners, they will present with rage and things like that, really intense emotions, and it's really their trauma. So that's kind of the way I approach it first. Let's see if it's trauma, present day trauma, past trauma, and in combination, it's really, a lot to deal with. The other thing that I would do is I would start reprocessing some of this. I would probably teach you in session. I do a lot of things with my clients in helping you feel what your body feels like when it's in a calm state. So I'm certified in hypnotherapy, so I do some visualization exercises to teach you how to, kind of begin to regulate in the moment. I'll give you some practical skills to use. Again, I feel badly that you had trauma in your treatment. That's not the case for everybody. And I imagine it's going to be really hard for you to trust a therapist. And so it's okay to check in. You might want to check and see what types of, I would go for Prodependence all the way. I think you're going to You're going to have a therapist that is so compassionate and understanding. And I know that there's no judgment there. But with my clients, I do go, okay, let's talk about your anger and how it helps you and why it's hard to give it up. And, are there some other ways to deal with your anger? So I'm looking at your anger kind of on this continuum. Up here is rage, and down here is, I have no anger at all. Okay, where can we move you so it feels like, it's not as destructive to you or to your partner?
Yeah.
So hopefully that's helpful, some ideas.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice answer. Thank you. This next one, mostly just a comment. My husband has been in recovery for 22 years and has had several relapses. I'm embarrassed to say I've stayed. I am so afraid of groups. I don't tell my friends because they are not supportive. I like what you said. I don't know if you want to comment on that or just acknowledge.
I would just say, I have had women that have had husbands, in recovery for a long time, and they do slip, and it's still betrayal trauma for you. It's taking you back into it. Remember, I just mentioned the trauma tree. Well, I can have a situation that's up here, my leaves and my branches of my trauma tree, that will, in today's time, take me back into the root of my trauma. So when my husband slips or my partner slips, then for me as the betrayed partner, takes me back into the intensity of the initial trauma. So if you can understand that, right, it'll help you have more compassion for yourself and what you're doing. I understand why you've stayed, and I'm going to encourage you not to be afraid of groups. Seeking Integrity has some awesome groups for women. Drop in, find somebody local who does a Prodependence based group. You need the support of other people, so when your husband does slip, you have a community to turn to that will validate your feelings, will support you, and it'll help you regulate quicker as well. I understand why you don't turn to friends, because they're not supportive. So I encourage you, find somebody, find a group who is supportive and understands. It's really important.
This next question here, we'll try and address this in the time we have left. After betrayal, trauma, and abuse and abandonment, the shock of all this is still in my body. I gained weight, I have insomnia, exhaustion, etc. Have you ever heard of this?
Absolutely, I've heard of this. A really great book out there that some of my clients will read. I'm going to tell you, this is written for a therapist, but That Body Keeps the Score by Vissel van der Kolk is a great book. Our body and our emotions are so connected. So when I have abuse and abandonment, man, that shock I feel in my body. And I'm not going to lie, even as a therapist, I know that I have abandonment trauma. And in extreme cases, I can feel it come up in my body. For me, it feels like a knife in my heart and a pit in my stomach, like that. And then I know, oh, this is what it is. And then I can work on, in the moment, I've got the skills and tools to do what I need to do, the self-care I need to do to get myself back into balance. But the way I can, because I can do that now, is a result of the fact that I worked with a therapist who processed my trauma. So you've got to go back and process. Now, when I worked on my betrayal trauma recovery, I didn't just process the betrayal trauma. I had previous traumas I needed to process as well around that. I found that as I did that my body responded. As I worked on my trauma with very intention, and it's not easy, I'm not going to lie, it's hard work, but along the way, you're feeling relief. So it makes the hard work worth it. And so I did find that I could sleep again. And you're going to find that the weight that you've gained and the exhaustion you feel, is going to lessen. The other thing too, though, is trauma can also take a toll on our physical body. We may have to also then go in, and I know for me it did. I had to go in and find a supportive healthcare provider that could look at the effect that it had on my thyroid and on my adrenal glands and some of that exhaustion, and to get the support I needed on the physical level as well. So yes, I have heard of that. I encourage you, if you haven't reprocessed your trauma, find a therapist that's qualified, that has all those really wonderful modalities. Process that, get the physical support you need, and understand that there is possible to work through this.
Yeah, and all of the trauma therapies we know that work well, like EMDR and some of them, they all have a somatic component, meaning there's some bodily component, and you know, I talked with Dr. Fawcett about David Fawcett about this all the time. And, you know, we have theories, like it just, the physical movement helps the feelings move through the body, because, you know, I know for me, it will camp right in my solar plexus or right up here, you know, lower neck, upper shoulders. That's when I know something's wrong, or my intestines, you know, which is far less pleasant, or far more unpleasant, I would say. But you know, it's TMI, stop. But you know, sometimes even without having a trauma therapy session, I can just go for a walk, and the movement seems to move things around a little bit, like some of the breath work grounding that Debbie mentioned earlier. I always breathe in and collect the anger and breathe out and take the anger with it. And I think just combining a physical exercise with that, even a light one like a walk, makes it that much more effective.
Yeah. We had a couple things as you were talking, Scott, I thought of, you know, moving trauma out of your body. A couple things I recommend is find a good breathwork class. There's some really great ones out there, and that is a great way to release trauma. The other thing is I recommend to my clients, and I did this myself, is get body work done. Find a really good massage therapist who understands trauma, and get work done on your body. It is so important. That's another aspect that is not only relaxing and it'll help calm your system down, but it does help your body release. So don't be surprised if you go in for a massage and you end up crying, because it's a release and it's a great way to do it.
Yeah. And that's really good advice for betrayed partners. It's not always good advice for the addict. Sometimes we have to say,
Absolutely.
no massages for you. But because it's just too triggering. But even most addicts, having body work done really releases emotional pain as well as physical pain. It's kind of amazing. And I'll just reiterate, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk is absolutely brilliant. Highly recommended. We're out of questions. We're also out of time. Debbie, thank you so much for a great session. I will get this posted right away. Debbie, do you want to say anything to take us out?
No, I don't. It's just nice to be here, and I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and I always enjoy working with you, Scott.
Thanks. Good to see you.
You too. Take care.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.